Number 9. Stephen Brown and Haley Donduron. To earn some extra money for her family, 51-year-old school teacher Thelma Boinville took a second job cleaning vacation rentals on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. One day in 2017, she went to clean a property while her daughter waited in the car outside. As Boinville entered the home, she encountered a pair of burglars who were later identified as Stephen Brown and his then-girlfriend Haley Donduron. Someone tied Boinville to a chair and brutally murdered her with a machete, then tied her daughter up and left the property. The suspects then fled the scene but were identified and captured with help from Boinville's daughter, who survived the attack. In court, Stephen Brown admitted responsibility for burglarizing the rental and kidnapping the victims, but he denied having any involvement in Boinville's murder. He claimed that he went to survey the property and returned to discover that Donduron had killed Boinville. The prosecution argued that Brown was the only defendant who was strong enough to restrain Boinville and pointed out how the victim's daughter had implicated both suspects in the murder. A jury convicted Brown of murder and recommended a life sentence without parole, but a judge will ultimately decide whether the killer deserves to become eligible for parole at any point. Brown will be sentenced in May 2023, and Donduron is scheduled to go on trial in July. Number 8. Homeowner fights back. When a Jacksonville, Arkansas homeowner caught two people trying to burglarize his home in broad daylight one day in 2023, he grabbed his gun and shot at the intruders, striking one of them. Police rushed to the residence after receiving a call about a burglary in process, but they didn't learn about the shooting until they arrived at the scene. The wounded individual was taken to the hospital, where he was reported to be in a stable condition. Police spokeswoman April Kaiser said that he would face charges once he was released from the hospital, but declined to go into further detail. A second suspect, 22-year-old Kylan Brown, was arrested on suspicion of residential burglary and tampering with physical evidence. While he and his alleged co-conspirator are now facing a world of legal problems, they're both incredibly lucky to be alive. Hopefully, the close call was the lesson they needed to avoid ending up in a similar situation in the future. Authorities made no mention of the homeowner facing charges and declined to mention his name, suggesting that the incident may still be under investigation, or he may have been cleared of any wrongdoing. Number 7. The Miramar Murders. During a night out in Hollywood, Florida back in 1994, Sharon Anderson and Marie Rogers ran into local bar owner Casimir Sokarski, known among locals as Butch Casey. The women were regulars at Casey's bar, so they felt comfortable going to his house in Miramar to continue the party when he invited them over later that evening. But Sharon and Marie failed to return home by the next evening, causing their families to fear the worst. The bar's manager recalled seeing the pair leave with Butch, who wasn't answering his phone calls. Officers went to Butch's residence and found him, Sharon, and Marie dead on the floor. They had been shot execution style. Home surveillance footage showed the trio socializing when out of nowhere two masked and armed men barged inside. They beat and terrorized the victims for several minutes while searching the house, then shot them all dead. Before leaving, one of the intruders removed his mask and unknowingly revealed his face to the camera. In a case with little other evidence, the image proved crucial in identifying Pablo Ibar and Seth Penalva as the prime suspects. Both men were convicted of murder, but Penalva was found innocent and set free in 2012 after numerous trials, convictions, death sentences, and appeals. Ibar won a new trial in 2019 and was reconvicted and sentenced to life in prison. The case remains plagued by unanswered questions. Many suspect that Ibar is innocent, despite being tied to the scene through DNA on a clothing item that he claimed his roommate borrowed from him that night. The identity of the other suspect is also a mystery, and no definitive motive for the crime was ever established. There are also rumors about the mob being involved and Casey owing them money. Some suspect Ibar and Penalva were charged simply because they fit the profile in the eyes of the police, and that prosecutors became irrationally fixated on securing a conviction. Number 6. Brian Overton. During the early morning hours one day in February 2023, a 71-year-old woman awoke to the sound of a heavy object crashing through a window at her home in Spalding County, Georgia. The next thing she knew, a male intruder was demanding money from her at gunpoint. He made the victim hand over her car keys and debit card then forced her into her car and drove to a nearby bank, where he withdrew money from an ATM using her debit card. The suspect dropped the senior citizen back off at her home and sped off in her car. She was lucky to be alive and safe, according to Spalding County Sheriff Darrell Dix, who told WSB-TV that most crimes of this nature end with the victim being hurt or killed. Police located the stolen car later that day with two men inside. One of the men, 29-year-old Brian Overton, appeared to be wearing the same shirt that the burglary suspect was seen wearing as a mask in surveillance footage from the bank where the victim's debit card was used. He also had what appeared to be a fresh cut on his hand, and police found the stolen debit card in his pocket. Overton faces a laundry list of charges, including first-degree home invasion, burglary, kidnapping, armed robbery, aggravated assault, motor vehicle theft, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and 2 drug charges. Number 5. Hailey Kiefer and Nicholas Brady. After retiring from the U.S. State Department, Byron David Smith moved back to his sleepy hometown of Little Falls, Minnesota. In 2012, the 64-year-old claimed to be the victim of at least a half-dozen home burglaries. He only reported 1 burglary to police and instead took matters into his own hands by installing a home security system and wearing a holstered gun. Determined to catch the intruders, Smith parked his vehicle away from his house on Thanksgiving Day and waited. A little while later, he saw 18-year-old Hailey Kiefer, whom he suspected of being involved in the burglaries, drive by his residence. Smith rushed home, entered his basement, removed the light bulbs from the lights, turned on a recording device, and hid. The recorder captured audio of a window being smashed upstairs. 12 minutes later, Kiefer's cousin Nicholas Brady began descending the basement stairs. Smith shot him 3 times and could be heard taunting the young man's lifeless body as he wrapped it in a tarp and dragged it to another room. When Brady failed to emerge from the home, Kiefer became concerned and went inside. Smith shot her as she entered the basement and sarcastically apologized for it. Kiefer screamed, "Oh my God!" and Smith shot her again, multiple times. The next day, Smith called the police to report the incident, claiming that he didn't call sooner because he didn't want to bother them on Thanksgiving. His attorneys claimed that the shootings were justified under the Castle Doctrine, which allows homeowners to defend their property with lethal force. But prosecutors argued that the crime was premeditated and accused Smith of using excessive force after lying in wait for the victims. Smith was convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life without parole. He appealed his case numerous times, but the courts have upheld the ruling and he remains behind bars. Number 4. Robert Reams. When a mother discovered a man breaking into her Hammond, Louisiana home one morning in early 2023, she wasted no time springing into action to protect her 2 children. She immediately confronted the intruder and the two got into a physical altercation, which didn't last very long before the woman shot the stranger. Police responded to the residence, where they found 51-year-old Robert Reams dead from a gunshot wound. According to a report, Reams had broken into the home using a shovel and a lug wrench. He was on parole after serving nearly 20 years in prison for armed robbery, and investigators later connected him to a carjacking that happened in the hours leading up to the botched home invasion. Shortly after news of the incident broke, Tangifoa Parish Sheriff's Office Chief Jimmy Travis told the press that once the investigation was finished, the findings would be forwarded to the district attorney for review. But he said that the shooting appeared to be a justified case of a homeowner exercising Second Amendment rights to protect herself and her children from a violent home invasion. Number 3. Staten Island slaying. After noticing some unusual activity in his Staten Island home late at night in December 2021, 38-year-old bodybuilder and father of 2, Tamer Sharawi, found himself face-to-face with a group of intruders. One of the suspects shot Sharawi in the shoulder, and they all fled the scene. Sharawi was rushed to the hospital, where doctors did everything they could to try saving his life. Sadly, he died from his injuries. A neighbor's surveillance camera captured footage of the suspects entering the home. Several minutes later, a gunshot could be heard, and they ran out the front door. The crime came as a shock to the neighborhood, where homicides are practically unheard of. Grief-stricken neighbors described Sharawi as the type of neighbor anyone would love to have, who was always willing to help someone in need, and as a dedicated family man whose life revolved around his kids. It was hard to imagine that anyone who knew him personally would want to harm him, and at first police were also stumped. More than a month later, authorities charged 40-year-old Nathaniel Morton and 35-year-old Caitlin Reuter with murder, robbery, and gun possession. A third suspect, 20-year-old Emmanuel Sullivan, was arrested several weeks later but died at Rikers Island while awaiting trial. A fourth and final suspect, 24-year-old DeAndre McClellan, was captured in Alabama more than 6 months after the murder. Prosecutors are accusing Caitlin Reuter, who previously trained with Shirawi, of masterminding the crime. After Shirawi's death, she allegedly posted a video tribute to him on social media, along with an Instagram photo with a caption stating, "Would you believe me in the car? What if I never dropped you home? What if we drove until the morning?" Some have speculated that the cryptic post reflects Reuter's own reflections about her role in the crime. But the case is ongoing, and whether the trial will answer this and other questions remains to be seen. Number 2. Justin Hodges. Until recently, Justin Hodges faced a promising future as a rising college football star, but the defensive back who played for the University of Central Florida was kicked off the team in early 2023 after being arrested on suspicion of a home invasion robbery. Hodges and several other masked intruders allegedly entered a residence in downtown Orlando, where they beat Nehemiah Fargas and threatened him with guns. The suspects are also accused of stealing the victim's phone and some recording equipment. According to investigators, the victim's girlfriend, Nevaeh Moshe, had stopped by the apartment the day before wearing clothing that belonged to a new friend who was later identified as Hodges. Fargas was understandably upset about seeing his girlfriend in another man's attire and threw the clothes out a window. Moshe allegedly returned to the apartment the next day with Hodges and 2 other male suspects. She knocked on the door so Fargas would answer, and the men allegedly ambushed him as soon as he opened it. Hodges reportedly told detectives that he was only there to help the woman retrieve her belongings from the victim's apartment. But police didn't buy it, and he was charged with felony home invasion robbery, bringing his short-lived football career to an abrupt end. Moshe was also charged. According to detectives, she confessed to the crime. The other 2 suspects remain at large. Number 1. Mysterious quadruple murder. 29-year-old Marie Altador had just given birth to her second child in 1997 when her mom, Teresa Laverne, traveled from Haiti to the family's home in Miramar, Florida to help out with the kids. When Marie's husband, George, couldn't reach her over the phone one morning from his workplace, he asked his brother-in-law to check on the household. In what detectives have described as one of the most heinous crimes in the city's history, Marie, Teresa, and the kids were found brutally murdered inside the home. The scene was so bloody that the first officers to go inside wore biohazard suits. The killer had scrawled a message on the wall stating, "They stole my drugs and I want my $100,000 drug money." But the gruesome nature of the murders suggested that the crime was more personal than a drug deal gone bad, and that someone killed the victims in a fit of rage. Investigators never ruled George out as a person of interest, but never came up with enough evidence to consider him a suspect. The case remains unsolved to this day, leaving the victims' loved ones impatient for justice. In 2017, police said that they were interested in speaking with a family friend known as Didro Rock or Rock, who they believed might have information about what led to the murders. But they were unsure of his whereabouts at the time, and it's unclear whether they have any meaningful leads at this point. In 2022, on the 25th anniversary of the horrific crime, the victim's surviving relatives pleaded with the public to think about how they'd feel if it happened in their family, and to come forward with any information that might help solve the case. Thanks for watching. Would you rather come home to find a protective mother bear raiding your kitchen, or have $500 worth of valuables stolen by a home intruder? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.